week on The Beat.
He's got a great body type. He's really versatile. And you see a lot of disruptive playmaking ability on tape. So it should be a big week for him.
We get an inside look at what scouts think of the Dogs headed to the Senior Bowl, plus which dog could improve their draft stock the most this week. And Mike has a message for skeptical UGA basketball fans as the Hoop Dog slide continues. Here we go.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Hey there, and welcome into On the Beat. Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith with you on this Monday night. Mike, season may be in the rear view, but it is a busy week on the Beat.
Yeah, it really is. You know, you got 5 Georgia players down there at the Senior Bowl looking to really improve their draft stock. And, of course, we know the Georgia basketball team, they have to bounce back Tuesday night against South Carolina after a tough loss at Florida, Cody.
Yeah, we'll get to all of that stuff. Got a great interview with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, coming up in just a couple of minutes. But as we wanted to kick off the conversation, you know, I had to start with this because I'm sitting over the weekend, and usually, the last 7 years at least, in the NFL playoffs, I got no rooting interest. I'm hardly looking for anything. I'm just trying to find something to make me want to feel something. Well, Conference Championship Sunday gave us a lot to feel, a lot of dogs, and for the 24th straight year, Georgia Bulldogs will be represented in the biggest game of them all, the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's remarkable, you know, and you see these guys all over the NFL that played for Kirby Smart now. You go back and look at that 2021 team. How in the world did anybody ever stop the Bulldogs? Ladd McConkey, George Pickens, James Cook, Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell. They were everywhere, and now we see them with the Philly Dogs. Seemingly all these players on defense. There'd be even more if Nakobe Dean hadn't had a season-ending knee injury in the wild card round. But, man, Nolan Smith is lighting it up. He is on fire. 4 tackles. You see that sack yesterday on Jaden Daniels. Pretty much ended the day for the Washington Commanders. Jordan Davis with a rare sack busting through there. And Jalen Carter, such a menace. I mean, the guy is just seemingly unstoppable. Harassed Jaden Daniels all day long. Really contributed to the Commanders committing those 3 turnovers. Then the Eagles offense cashed in.
Yeah, exciting to be able to root for those guys. You talk about Jalen Carter. PFF stats had him with 8 quarterback hurries yesterday, which is the definition of havoc making, right? Which is what Kirby Smart talks so much. I was kind of hoping we get that Jaden Daniels moment like the LSU SEC championship where he picked him up and kind of held his hand up, because it kind of felt that way for the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday.
Well, he gave us that the week before against Matthew Stafford when they had that moment and they knocked Stafford and the Rams out. But you know, this Eagles front is really something else, and you really got to give Howie Roseman credit for identifying that. Of course, we have that up in our story when I had a chance to talk with the Eagles VP and GM at the NFL Combine a few years back, and he said, look, these Georgia guys come out ready to go. They really know how to build an NFL player, and of course, they followed up in that acquiring these guys. I mean, Keely Ringo's on that team. They acquired Lewis Seen. They just can't get enough of the Georgia Bulldogs up there in Philadelphia.
Yeah, AFC Championship game. Well, McCole Hardman, of course, on the roster for the Chiefs. He's out for the year. Malik Herring was inactive, but is on that roster for the Chiefs. Will be making another Super Bowl run for him. But the story of the AFC Championship game was the other former Georgia running back, James Cook.
Yeah, James went Superman. I mean, that touchdown that he had just kind of harkened memories of the Brock Bowers Matrix play against Ohio State in the CFP semifinal in 2022. You see James stretching it out there over the goal line. Just incredibly determined running from James Cook. I mean, the guy was, he was literally unstoppable. A lot of the Buffalo fans are saying, hey, where was he at on the final drive? I mean, he had 13 carries for 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had a 6-yard touchdown run, really impressive. And then, of course, we know that James can also catch passes, 3 catches for 49 yards. And he joins the unique company of O.J. Simpson as the only Buffalo Bills running back to score 20 or more touchdowns in a season. 6 multi-touchdown games for James Cook. Star is on the rise, representing RBU with the Buffalo Bills.
Very cool to see that. You got James Cook, of course, the younger brother of an NFL running back as well, Dalvin Cook. Of course, a guy you talked about, really great with his hands out of the backfield. Could this sound like somebody else? How about Trevor Etienne, younger brother of an NFL running back, pretty good out of the backfield? And we're going to get a chance to see Trevor Etienne at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile this week and to get all the inside scoop, really what people are on the inside are talking about the Dogs. Mike got to catch up with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, earlier today.
Well, now welcome Jim Nagy. He's the executive director, leader of the Senior Bowl. Looks like another bumper crop of players, Jim. Last year, you guys set a record believe 110 drafted players off last year's Senior Bowl roster, including 10 first-round picks. What are we looking at this year? Give me some of the highlights of the guys we're going to see practicing during the week and then playing in the game on Saturday.
Yeah, our guys actually practice and play down here in Mobile. We're excited about this group. I think it's our best roster we've had. Last year's group was great. We didn't get a ton of buy-in from the junior class last year. All of those 10 first-round picks were seniors. I think we got a bunch of juniors in this class that can go in the first round. So the deepest position group is probably running back. I mean, this is the best running back group that's come out in a long time, which is good because in free agency it's pretty dry. Teams that need a running back are going to have to go to the draft. And then the D-line group, I'd go to the D-line. D-line's pretty stacked this year. That's one area we got a lot of buy-in from the junior class. So looking forward to seeing those guys out there tomorrow.
Well, let's start talking about the Georgia Dogs, and let's start at running back. Trevor Etienne, a guy you didn't think you were going to get. Everybody thought he was coming back to Georgia. You found out he wasn't, made that call, got him in the game. Tell me what they're going to see from Trevor Etienne and what Trevor needs to show the NFL scouts.
Yeah, we didn't think he was coming out. You know, we have really close communication with the Georgia staff. It's a guy they thought they were getting back, and so we went full at running back. We didn't have a spot for him.
Yeah.
When he declared, so then he declares, and you got a chance to get a player like Trevor Etienne, you create a spot, right? So we went over our number at running back to get him, but we're excited. I think he's one of the most dynamic backs in this year's draft. He's a true 3-down back. He's really good in the pass game. Those guys always show well down here in Mobile because this week is kind of a space week. You know, it's a space league they're getting ready to go to. So we put them in a lot of drills where they get those linebackers and safeties out in space trying to cover. And, like any running back, I think pass protection down here is the biggest thing. You know, you don't see a lot of that in college. And just seeing the toughness and the willingness, technique can come, though they can get taught technique. But the NFL teams are going to be looking for just that willingness to, collision people in pass protection and hold up.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about the Senior Bowl is the drills throughout the week. You get to isolate these guys one-on-one. They're not protected by a lot of other guys with G's on their helmets. You find out one-on-one who these guys really are. And another Georgia Bulldog that's going to have an opportunity to showcase his skills, Tate Ratledge. Now, Tate got a lot of awards and a lot of honors, but he might have some work to do. Only played 10 games this year with the tightrope. Tell me about Tate Ratledge and what he'll bring to this game in these practices.
Yeah, Tate's not going to be here. Either's Jared Wilson. Both those guys pulled out for whatever reason, so they won't be here.
Well, that's a surprise on Tate. I thought that maybe Jared would. He was the number 1 rated center. Of course, last year, Sed Van Pran played that game. It hurt him a little bit. He could have got some work done. You never know what these guys are going to do.
I'll say this: it hurt Sed Van Pran a lot. He was projected to be a 3rd-round pick, and everyone loved his intangibles and his leadership, and that's something that comes across when they're down there on the field with these NFL GMs and head coaches. That's the stuff they're looking for. So yeah, Jared misstepped in a drill on Saturday, literally 24 hours before getting on a plane, which is unfortunate. They were working a wide zone drill. They said he stepped wrong and hurt his foot. So it's unfortunate because he is the number 1 center in the draft, but that could still be a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. Is good. Creed Humphrey's a first-team All-Pro, played here in the Senior Bowl, and he went in the late 2nd. And Creed's won it. So that's just a position that teams like to wait on. So, yeah, it was a bummer for Jared. I know he was excited to be here.
Yeah, great player, great leader. And conversely, guys that made a lot of money. I can't think of a better example. Now, there's 2 great examples. Kenny McIntosh did really well for himself, got himself drafted by going to your game. How about Ladd McConkey? Just before we get into these guys, looking back at what Ladd McConkey did last year, Jim, how important was that for Ladd to get that record-breaking 2nd-round contract by coming to the Senior Bowl?
Well, the game sets up perfect for a guy like Ladd, too, because he's such a good route runner. These one-on-one drills, he's a hard cover, regardless. And so, again, I think a lot of people discounted how athletic Ladd was. And you saw it here. I mean, you should have seen it on Georgia tape. I certainly did. But, yeah, he showcased it all week down here.
Here's a guy I think could really stand out. Ty Ingram Dawkins is a guy we've seen flashes from throughout his career. This looks like a guy that could make some money at the Senior Bowl. What have you seen from Ingram Dawkins?
Yeah, he's a high upside player. Like you said, if you grade the flashes, you get really excited about him. It's another guy we went back and forth with on the Georgia staff. I think he was vacillating whether he's going to come out or stay in. And we push these guys to go back to school. We're not trying to take them. We'll try to get them whenever they come out. So we're not ever pushing pushing these guys to come out as juniors. But yeah, I mean, he's got a great body type. He's really versatile, and you see a lot of disruptive playmaking ability on tape. So it should be a big week for him.
Yeah, another guy I expect big things from, and I remember talking to you about him at midseason. He wasn't on the list yet. He played himself into it. Smile Munden, a veteran that had a foot that slowed him down, was playing his best football at the end of the year. What is Smile going to try to show these NFL coaches and assistants?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. He was playing his best football late. He's extremely intelligent. It's just the injury thing, just needs to stay healthy because he's really athletic. The cover stuff is going to be great. Like talking to Glenn Schumann and those guys. If there was a guy on that roster that was able to cover Brock Bowers in practice over the last few years, it was Smile Mondin. So again, this is another guy I think the week sets up really well for.
No doubt about it. One guy all the NFL scouts want to see is Arian Smith, a world-class speed. We know Arian had some tough times this year, but he's got a chance to prove some things down there in Mobile too.
Yeah, you can clean up the hands. I mean, that's something that I've been a part of a lot of teams where we've drafted receivers that, had some, maybe not the most natural catchers. You get on a jugs machine, you can cure a lot of that stuff. What you can't do is you can't teach a guy to run 10-1 in the 100 meters. Arian's going to be the fastest guy in this year's draft. He's going to go to the combine and blow that out. And he and I spoke yesterday at registration, and he knows. I told him, I said, your speed is going to feel a lot different to these scouts and evaluators in person than on tape. And a lot of scouts went through Athens this year. Of course, there's a ton of foot traffic through Athens, but it's not the head coaches and GMs. It's not the guys making the draft picks. So he'll be able to make an impact. He's going to look different. That speed's going to look different down there on the field.
Jim, one of the cool things about working with you is you've been a scout. You've been there. You've been a part of 4 Super Bowl winning teams, worked with some of the greatest coaches ever. And you see talent. And one of the guys that you identified may not be the hottest guy on the radar, but you believe in him is Dan Jackson. Talk about Dan. They call him Dirty Dan up here at Georgia. It's not fun because he's such a good guy. Tell me about Dan Jackson and what you think he's going to show this week.
He's a really good player, man. I feel like I don't understand why people discount this guy. I was at the Georgia spring game last year, and I feel like he was all over the place. Forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, and interception. I mean, he's got instincts. He's got closing bursts. He's physical. There's so much to like. I don't understand why more people aren't talking about this guy. I mean, yes, he was a walk-on. Yeah, he's a white safety. You can try to pigeonhole him all you want, but if you just watch the football player, he's a dog. And like we had Tyke Smith in the game last year. He probably benefited from the game more than anybody. Going into the game, most guys had him as a 5th or 6th round draft pick, and he goes in the 3rd round. And as soon as we invited Dan, like he texted me, he loved playing with the guy. So great teammate, really good player. He's going to have a good week here.
Yeah, Javon Bullard last year, 3 Dawgs went in the top 100 out of their secondary last year. Georgia with a really good reputation with their secondary down there. And Jim, you made a call a couple years ago. I think the story bears telling on Kenny McIntosh. Late in the draft, you actually called the Seattle Seahawks. And again, this is why I enjoyed talking to you so much. Your opinion matters so much. What do you get out of seeing these guys down there? And that call that you made for Kenny, that was conviction that he earned in the Senior Bowl, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was such a good player. He got hurt by the combine. I told the guys at orientation last night, you can't hurt yourself at the Senior Bowl if you just come down here and compete. You're going to go to the combine. Guys are going to run slow. Guys are going to go to Georgia Pro Day and run slow. And we saw that last year with Lassiter. Credit the Houston Texans for blocking all that 40 nonsense out of their evaluation and just taking a good football player. But yeah, I mean, Kenny came out of this game. I thought he was going to be a 4th round pick, and then he goes to Indy and he doesn't run very fast, and it hurts him. So, I worked in Seattle. I'm close with all those guys, and they'd already drafted a couple running backs, at least one. I know they took Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round that year, and we actually had a higher grade on McIntosh than Charbonnet in our building, our staff. So, yeah, and Kenny, I mean, look at him late in the year this year. When he finally got some run, Kenneth Walker went down, and he was in that rotation with Charbonnet, and he was averaging like 6 yards a carry in some of those games late in the year. So I'm excited to see what Kenny's going to do. I mean, hopefully he earned himself more of a chance late this season.
Yeah, I think he could be on the verge of a breakout. Now, Pete Carroll, your guy, back in the NFL with the Raiders. Let's keep an eye on that and see if some Georgia Dogs end up there. You mentioned the running backs being deep and the defensive line being deep. I can't help but notice 3 quarterbacks that managed to beat Georgia this year are going to be there. Milroe, Riley Leonard, Jackson Dart. Tell me a little bit about these quarterbacks. We've seen them in opposing gear. What are they trying to do to become NFL quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl, though?
Well, for all our quarterbacks, Mike, you know this, they've never huddled up You know, we're in an era of football where college quarterbacks never get in a huddle. They never have to spit out verbiage. They never get under center. They just don't do a lot of things that you have to do in the National Football League. So, you know, and then they just need to show leadership around a bunch of strange players. Teams are looking for who can connect, who's got the connectivity. And then obviously like the on the field stuff, the arm strength and the feet and the mechanics and all that stuff is important. But to me, it's more like how they're going to operate in a pro system with pro coaching.
I want to ask you about this guy because you scouted him deep. You thought he was going to be at the Senior Bowl, then maybe he wasn't going to be at the Senior Bowl. Then we thought he was going pro. Now he's going to Miami. Give me the 10,000-foot real juice on Carson Beck. What does he look like as an NFL player? Did he make the right call? And what do you think is ahead for that quarterback?
Yeah, he was our number one rated quarterback coming into the year. I thought he was on a really upward trajectory. I thought he had a chance to go late in the first round last year and he come out and had a good process. He was kind of right on that cusp as a second round guy for most teams. And for whatever reason, I don't know. I haven't talked to Carson about it. I haven't really talked to the guys at Georgia about it. Seemed to be pressing a little bit this year. You know, losing Ladd and Brock Bowers certainly hurts, but it's not like they didn't have weapons on that offense. That offense wasn't devoid of talent. So, you know, maybe it's a good reset for him. You know, it's happy to see him go to Miami. Cam Ward, you know, kind of went from Wazoo to Miami and had a great year and helped himself. And so I don't know what the decision was. Well, you know, why leaving Georgia? I don't know any of that stuff. But he's certainly got a lot of things to like. I mean, he's a big guy. He's got a quick release. He's been accurate. I mean, there's plenty of things to like about him. He just needs to come back and have a better year.
What does it mean, Jim? Before I let you go, we're seeing the portal. The portal has become such a big part of the game. Does it have any effect on players in their NFL draft evaluation process? What do scouts look for when they change teams? How does that fit into the whole process of a kid growing into an NFL player?
Well, I mean, Mike, I guess it's case by case, but sort of like big, you know, just blanket statement. I think it can almost help the evaluation process because now you're getting exposed to at least like another building of people that know the player, or building or two or three. So you can really dig down on who the guy is, and then you know in a lot of cases you see him, you know, in a different system. You know, they're being asked to do different things at a different school, so it can actually help the evaluation.
Last question for you, Jim. A lot of guys stay at Georgia because of the level of competition. You've spoken about Kirby Smart before. When you look at Georgia this year, obviously Georgia lost a first-round playoff game. There's some hand-wringing. Maybe the Dogs are dropping off. Your thoughts on Kirby Smart, his program, and the direction you see it going with the talent that you assess?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any more respect for any program in the country than Kirby's. He's done it. He's built an unbelievably competitive program. You kind of know what you're getting. From an NFL perspective, you know the kind of guy you're getting coming out of his program. I mean, they're tough, they're disciplined, they're physical. So again, it's just a 1-year deal. A lot of things have to come together to win a national championship, and I understand that you know the expectation level in the fan base is really high, but I don't think there's any sort of drop off in Athens, Georgia. I don't foresee that.
Certainly no drop off at the Senior Bowl. It's Monday morning, start of the week for you, Jim. Really appreciate you joining us with DawgNation. Look forward to seeing you down there in Mobile.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl Executive Director, has done a lot with that football game and helped a lot of these Georgia players as they try to advance in their NFL career.
A lot of really good stuff right there from Jim Nagy, and we're going to talk a lot about that. I got to talk to Mike about that. We'll follow up on it. We will do that right after the break. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
So, you going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this
You
week?
gonna play this week? You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
And welcome to the Ingles Game of the Week as the War Horses square off against the rival.
He's going in.
He's going in. Go, baby!
Ingles, we're with you every step of the way.
Welcome back to On the Beat. We just heard Mike's conversation with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, and so much to unpack from that conversation. Mike, the place I want to start, Nagy sounded really optimistic about Arian Smith and the conversations he's had with him. And one thing that stuck out in my mind, he said you can't coach 10-1 speed. So despite everything that's happened in Arian's career, he can prove himself starting this week in Mobile.
Yeah, and I like that Jim pulled Arian aside and said, "Look, we can clean this up. You can get your hands right. You can start to, catch the ball better." I mean, obviously there was something almost mental with Arian, it seemed like at times, but the fact that Jim pulls the guy aside and said, "Listen, we all know what's going on here. You had some tough drops this year. This is a week where you can really show everyone who you are and not just running routes." I mean, yeah, that 10-1 speed it's going to be impressive and it's going to wow people in person. It's one thing for scouts and GMs to look at these guys on film, but when you see it in person, it's something else. We saw that last year with Ladd McConkey, basically uncoverable at the Senior Bowl. His stock shot up dramatically. Now, I don't know if Arian Smith can kind of have that sort of rise, but I think his speed will stand out. I think it's a great opportunity for Arian. And I think Arian can also show improved route running and his ability to block and his willingness to block. I mean, you get around this guy and you can't help but like his charisma and his attitude. I think he's going to make some money this week at the Senior Bowl and improve his draft stock.
And one thing it was really, and you mentioned Ladd McConkey. Ladd was down there last year. And one thing that coming out, and Jim wasn't afraid to say it, right, when he talked about Dan Jackson. So last year, Ladd McConkey was the white guy wide receiver, and everybody was kind of skeptical about that. Well, Dan Jackson comes in as the white guy safety this year, and Nagy, really interesting, said he's a lot more than what people are giving him credit for.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about Jim Nagy. And I know there's a lot of opinions and TV analysts, but Jim is different. This is a guy who was an NFL scout for 18 years. He's been a part of 6 Super Bowl teams, 4 of them winners. So, I mean, this is a guy that's worked with Belichick and Holmgren and Pete Carroll, Hall of Fame coaches. Jim knows his stuff. He's been running this bowl now, I guess this is his 7th year. You saw recently, Cody, he was a candidate for the New York Jets GM job. So when Jim Nagy speaks, you really listen. It's really unfiltered. He doesn't play favorites. I think that's very clear in the interview. And Jim told me a couple months ago, hey, you know who else I'm going to invite? I'm going to invite Dan Jackson. Even though there's not a lot of NFL buzz about this guy, I like this guy. I believe in this guy. I'm bringing him to the game. I'm going to do the NFL a favor. They may not be high on him, but I am. And Jim's the guy that'll fight for these Bulldogs. Just a couple years ago, I was in Kenny McIntosh's house during the NFL draft, and it was starting to look like he may not get drafted. He was entertaining free agent offers from the Cowboys and the Eagles, and then came a call from the Seattle Seahawks. And after the draft, I left Kenny's house. I called Jim. I said, wow, it was really great, that the Seahawks picked him. He said, yeah, I called the GM. And I said, there is a really good running back on the board. And Jim, as you heard in that interview, he had him rated ahead of the running back that the Seahawks had taken in the 2nd round. Wasn't afraid to share that. Kenny McIntosh right now on the verge of breaking out with the Seahawks owes a lot of that to Jim Nagy. So, I mean, this is a guy, when he believes in a player, he trusts his judgment, and he'll stand up for him. So that's got to say a lot to Dan Jackson. I know Dan's going to be real excited to be down there in Mobile this week.
Yeah, can't wait to hear from him. Of course, Mike going to be down there with Kaylee Mansell all week. We'll get to hear from those Dogs about why they wanted to be down there, what they felt like they have to prove. Now, that said, Jim broke a little news, right, saying a couple of Bulldogs are not going to be down there. Interesting to me to hear him talk about Tate Ratledge not being down there. Tate's listed as the number 2 guard on the board, so maybe he feels like he can't go up any higher. And same thing with Jared Wilson, who it sounded more like an injury, but Jared listed as the number 1 center. But kind of as Jim said, just because you're the number 1 center, I mean, you're making it in the 1st or 2nd round. It's just not one of those positions that's the NFL has a big priority on.
Yeah, he mentioned Sed Van Pran's decision to skip it, and I was disappointed with that too, because Sed Van Pran's a guy that goes to the board, draws it all up. You're around him, you sense the leadership and the character. Didn't have an opportunity to showcase that in an NFL huddle with NFL coaches. And Tate, I don't know his health status. If he's healthy, it's probably a mistake that he didn't go. I mean, this is a guy that had tightrope surgery. He was limited to 10 games. Again, another high character leader guy. He's got those intangibles that you take note of in person. And Jim's told me in the past, a lot of times, Cody, the Senior Bowl is not just about the draft. It's about the second contract. Sometimes these GMs and assistant coaches, a player will make an impression on them, and maybe they don't draft him, but that sticks. So when this guy's ready for that second contract, he remembers that face-to-face meeting. He remembers that spark that he got when he watched him play. Jim also told me a couple months ago, Dylan Fairchild actually rated ahead of Tate Ratledge on most NFL draft boards. Now, Fairchild's not going to be there either, but Tate's missing an opportunity to move up unless there's an injury involved. Same agent as Sed Van Pran. Probably, in my opinion, everybody's got their opinions. I think Tate's missing out on an opportunity.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear Jim say that, just that, like you said, he is not going to hold back on anything. One of the other things that stuck out, a couple other things. First, he was right on your wavelength with the Trevor Etienne. He said people inside the Georgia building thought that Trevor Etienne was coming back. So that was interesting. And then also talking about the transfer portal, I think as the lay fan, we think a lot of times of the transfer portal, oh, these guys are prima donnas, and the NFL folks aren't going to like that. They don't like the transfer guys. It was the complete opposite what Jim said. They almost like that more because they get to see him in two different offenses and they get two different kind of teams that they can ask about certain players.
Yeah, he did say it was on a case-by-case basis, but yeah, the glass is half full in terms of a kid going into a new situation. You get to see how he adapts, how he works in a different system, and how he plays around other players. That's one of the valuable things about the Senior Bowl. You know, the game is next Saturday, and a lot of people be tuned in at 2:30 p.m. on the NFL Network to watch the game. But in the practices, they break these guys out individually. It's one-on-one. And you mentioned Trevor Etienne a second ago. And yes, Trevor's fast, and Trevor can catch the ball and cut back. He's got great vision. You know, I love the guy. But pass blocking was not his forte. He's going to be isolated with some of the best linebackers in the nation in some of these drills. And Trevor's going to have to step up and show that he can pass protect. If he wants to be a three-down NFL back, that will really determine whether or not he goes on the second day. I don't think he'll fall to the third day. It is possible. I think he's going to run a good number. I think he's going to have a good combine. Kind of looks like a mid-second to mid-third round draft pick. But a lot of these coaches and assistants are going to get an opportunity to get up close and personal with Trevor Etienne. As Jim said, and as we reported, he was coming back. His agent had told us that. I think it was a very late decision by Trevor to go pro. I think he might have considered that he has a lot of mileage already. He's played 3 years of football. And how much could he have really improved his draft stock with another season versus the risk of injury? So he made the decision. You heard what Jim said. They were full at running back. But when he heard Trevor Etienne made that surprise move, he found a spot on that roster. He actually went over the number of running backs they planned on inviting to get Trevor down in that game.
Yeah, and Trevor will have to show off his durability as well, right? The injuries were something that's going to be on his record as they look at him in this NFL draft process. I'm sure at the Combine, every team brings their doctors, right, and they all poke and prod and figure that out. Another guy for this kind of the similar thing is Smile Munden, the linebacker for Georgia. He's dealt with injuries all of this year. But when you look at him, he seems like one of those guys who you talked about at the end really can start to jump up here if he can start showing what happened at the end of the season is really who I am.
Yeah, the old warhorse, Smile Munden, he was there for those championship games, took a lot of snaps for the Dog, played through a foot injury, really didn't get healthy until the Tennessee game. And you heard Kirby Smart say, played his best football game at Georgia in that 8 overtime classic against Tech. The thing Jim said about Smile was, hey, if there was one guy that could cover Brock Bowers in those practices that we don't see, that scouts do, it's Smile Munden. So this is a very big week for Smile to show his health, his football IQ. You know, when they're in the huddle and these NFL guys start throwing this NFL jargon around and asking the players to do some drills, Georgia players are very prepared for this. Kirby runs a very complex defense. It's very NFL-like. I expect Smile Munden to really turn some heads, open some eyes, and potentially work himself up into the second round.
Yeah, as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft, we will start talking more about the guys that keep getting mocked in the first round, the Jalen Walker, Malachi Starks, Mykel Williams, and they're going to have their time to shine. But this week, really, and as you go down there, I'm interested to know what you're most excited about finding out from some of these Georgia players who are mid to late round type of guys.
Well, I think Ty Ingram Dawkins is a guy that has a lot of upside, and he flashed at times at Georgia, but I think his maturity level was something that got talked about, his work ethic, you know, how consistent can he be? I mean, that whole Senior Bowl week is a job interview. From the time you walk through the door, everything is noticed, every conversation, the way you dress, the way you show up, what time you get to meetings, how you handle the huddle, how you handle situations, Cody. I remember, gosh, I guess it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, Jonathan Ledbetter got locked up in a drill with a player from Old Dominion, and the guy from Old Dominion wanted to fight Ledbetter, and Ledbetter did the mature thing, put his hands up, you know, whatever, dude, didn't get involved, and the guy next to me was actually Max Bullough, now linebackers coach with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Max said, boy, he made a really good move there. He said that kind of stuff right there can cost these guys money if they don't handle it right. So the maturity that Ledbetter showed, I just remembered that, and how Bullough told me how closely they watch this and what NFL teams think of players that can't control their temper or can't handle the moment. This is an area where Georgia Bulldogs always seem to come out ahead at the Senior Bowl. They know how to handle themselves in practice situations. They know how to take coaching, and they're really good, not just with the coaches, but with the fans afterward. I remember Jim telling me one of the things he loved about Kenny McIntosh is, look at that. He's the last guy out there signing autographs. He really loves this game. He really appreciates the fans. These are the small intangible things that stick with people, stick in their minds, and make them think, you know what, this guy's going to be a good NFL player.
Jonathan Ledbetter did so much maturing while he was in Athens, but being that kind of old head wise guy, he's also stuck around the NFL for quite a little while as well. We will look for Kaylee and Mike's full coverage from Mobile on our DawgNation video channels and DawgNation.com all week long. In just a moment, we're going to talk about, is Georgia basketball destined for disappointment yet again this year? But before we do that, we're going to talk about something not disappointing, but always exciting, and that is Daytona Beach, Florida. Daytona Beach, a sponsor of what we're doing here on DawgNation. Happy to have them with us. You think about Daytona Beach, you think about 23 miles of Atlantic coastline. And for me, it's sitting on a towel on the beach, but there's so much more going on at Daytona, surfing and fishing and kayaking. Of course, the great golf, and of course, NASCAR are going to get started up there in Daytona in just a few weeks. The Daytona 500 and Speed Weeks are coming up. You can fly into Daytona International Airport. It's quick and easy, great airport right there. So get down to Daytona Beach. If you want to figure out how to do that and save a couple bucks as well, go to DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals to get all the best deals to make sure you're keeping all that coin in your pocket as you get ready to head down to Daytona Beach, Florida. All right, on the beat time now. We're going to talk a little basketball because a couple of weeks ago, Michael, you couldn't toot the horn loud enough for Georgia basketball. Well, since then, they've had 4 straight losses, really not competitive against Florida this week. And I look back and I start, this is Cody Chaffins, Dog fan for 40 years, thinking, oh, here we go again. I think last year they were 14-6, and then they are now, finished the year 17-16. So, Mike, tell me why it's different this time.
Well, why it's different is the roster's a lot different. I like what Asa Newell brings. I think Silas Demery Jr. is 1 year older. Blue Kane is showing a lot of maturity. Look, Cody, the SEC is just historically good to the point where Joe Lunardi, who does bracketology for ESPN, he's done this since 1995, he believes 12 SEC teams will get into the tournament, maybe 13. So what's different is that a 7-11 record in the conference, and the Dogs would have to go 5-5 from here on out to attain that. He believes that can get you in the NCAA tournament if you're an SEC team because of the depth of the league. I mean, even after that loss to Florida, and, we see a 30-point loss, but, the computers just see a loss on the road to a quad 1 team. And Georgia has good losses. Again, forget the margin. It's the level of competition they're losing to. So even if you go to KenPom.com, the last rating I saw, and this is real time, so they adjust, they were 41st. They were ahead of teams like Memphis, Wake Forest, Cincinnati, Xavier. So it's not like these Dogs are floundering in the 80s or the 90s of the rankings. They still have the resume, the computer strength resume of a tournament team. Now, they got to win games. I mean, you can't just sit here and say, well, here it is. Let's take a snapshot. Let's go. They got to finish. They got to beat South Carolina. And South Carolina just played Florida within 1 and took number 14 Mississippi State to overtime Saturday. So this is not going to be an easy game. You got to take care of business at home. And you got to try to steal one on the road. And Saturday, oh my gosh, they got to go to number 4 Alabama on the road. That is a tough road trip. Now, next week, it kind of gets a little bit lighter. LSU comes to town. That's a team you should beat at home. Mississippi State coming to Stadium Coliseum, number 14 Mississippi State. That's one of those 50-50 games, an opportunity game. Then you travel to A&M and Buzz Williams. I mean, that's another top 20 program. Then you get Missouri at home. Missouri just broke into the top 25. Listen, it's a tough road, but these Dogs have proven they can hunt. They did beat Kentucky, Cody. They did beat a Rick Pitino St. John's team. They did beat an Oklahoma team that was ranked in the top 20 when they beat them. So they are capable, but they've got to get better. Got to stop turning the ball over. Need improved ball movement. This is where Mike White earns his salary. He likes his players. He likes the talent level, but he's got to be able to adjust in season and find some answers and find them quickly.
Yeah, like you said, 3 of those of the 4 losses, they're on a 4-game losing streak, have been on the road, and 3 of them have been to top 6 teams. It's like you said, every team you come up against, it always seems like there's a number beside their name. Now, that is not the case against South Carolina, 0-7 in the SEC.
Let me say this. I equate the 30-point loss at Florida to the Georgia 28-10 loss at Ole Miss. That was a wake-up call. And remember, we all thought dead in the water. Now, Kirby's been there, done it enough times that we don't have any doubt it'll just happen. Mike White hasn't done that here yet. Now, this is year 3 for Mike, but he's got a lot of talent around him, and Stegman Coliseum has been unbelievable. I mean, they've moved the student seating down. It's loud. It's aggressive. It makes a difference for Georgia. They had Auburn right there. I mean, Asa was right at the hole, hits the rim, bounces off, we got overtime against the number 1 team in the nation last Saturday. So they're not that far removed from playing some great basketball down the stretch. And that was a game they trailed 26-9 to the number 1 team in the nation and took them to the final second. So all I'm saying is this team has done more than past Georgia teams. They are more capable. But to your point, I understand we've been here before. It's happened before. I think this time it'll be different. I'm going to see the glass half full. We'll find out what happens Tuesday night, but I think the Dogs are going to get that one.
All right, and we'll mark the tape. And if you're right, we'll come back and they'll say, Mike told y'all, everybody, including me, which I feel like I'm always so negative on this show, but I try to. It's just the old dog fan of me that's been kicked too many times. So we got Georgia and South Carolina. That's coming up tomorrow night at Stegman Coliseum, 7 o'clock. And then Saturday it is against number 4 Alabama. That one again on the road. We're going to finish talking a little football here, and this note just kind of came out today. We're not doing necessarily a Mike's 30,000-foot view in this show, but I wanted to get your take. Ohio State defensive coordinator, or I guess former defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. Apparently Ohio State just told him, hey, please don't show up to our celebration this week. Knowles, of course, signed with Penn State this past Sunday. Fair or foul on Jim Knowles being uninvited to his own celebration with his team?
I mean, I don't know the inner workings of that. It seems awful petty to me. I mean, Jim Knowles is a really good coach who helped Ryan Day out quite a bit. Again, I don't know the inner workings. I know how Kirby's done it, and his assistants that have taken other jobs have been up front with him and coached through games. And I think everyone still considers Dan Lanning a friend of the program, even though he left and went to Oregon, or Sam Pittman at Arkansas.
Fran Brown, yep.
Shane Beamer. I mean, they may have ranked him number 6 instead of number 4, but I think Kirby would still count them among his friends. Again, I don't know the politics at Ohio State. I know things got hot. Let's remember that Ryan Day was on the hot seat for quite a while. Where was Jim Knowles in that mix? Was he not enough of an ally? I have seen it go south other places. Haven't seen it at Georgia, but have seen it at other places when a head coach starts to go sour and some of those assistants start scrambling and the head coach wonders, geez, who's saying what? Who can I trust? Maybe there was a little animosity between Day and Knowles before all this happened. I'm not sure. I know this, when they lost to Michigan, I don't think that loss was on Jim Knowles. It was on the offense with Ryan Day. So it's not a good look. Even if Ryan Day, in my opinion, had a problem with Jim Knowles, this is not something that needed to be made public and turned into this. To me, you celebrate as a team, you finish the campaign together, and even if you've got a problem with Knowles, let him go his happy way to Happy Valley. We'll see if he can make a difference for Penn State. They do return their quarterback, very talented quarterback. They're expected to be in the mix again. As for the Ohio State, they've got another portal to go out and get more players. They're going to need it. A lot of talent's going out the door there in Columbus, but like Georgia, they're very good at reloading. And hey, these playoffs showed us, you can finish 4th place in the Big Ten and still make the playoff and win a national championship. The regular season doesn't carry the weight that it once did. It's all about getting in the show and getting hot at the right times.
I just love when there's drama other places and it doesn't involve Georgia. It's the what's the word? The Schadenfreude, right? That I can appreciate everything else going on. They may have won the championship, but it's not all happy and up there in Columbus, Ohio.
No, it's not. And those fans were so hungry. And remember, they were going to fire this coach was on his way to getting fired, and they turned into the Mad Buckeyes. And we did see that act before. We saw Georgia play an extremely good, and I would even say this, Cody, you may disagree. I thought the 2022 Ohio State team led by C.J. Stroud that Georgia beat in the Peach Bowl was better than this year's version of Ohio State. That Marvin Harrison team was very good and very accomplished, and they played angry and hungry too. It took all Georgia had to beat them. Remember that field goal missing right at the stroke of midnight, and whoever won that game was going to beat TCU. So I get it that Ohio State fans kind of got it out for Georgia fans a little bit. And, they're saying, oh, geez, we wish we could have played Georgia. Say, be careful what you wish for, Ohio State. You had your chances, I recall. Pretty sure they backed out of a home and home, if I'm not mistaken, Cody.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I think it's that definitely the Peach Bowl that was the national championship game in that year, and I don't think anybody will argue with that. Really good stuff on the show today, Mike. Travel safe down to Mobile. Excited to see what you hear from get to go one-on-one with those guys a little bit, and they're no longer with Kirby over their shoulder, so they can be a little more free and a little more open with you, right?
And they usually are. I mean, I go back to our interview with Devontae Wyatt last year, and I'm like, why didn't this guy ever get an interview? He was unbelievable. He was so charismatic and fun. Maybe he had too much fun. Maybe that's why Kirby's, hey, stop having fun. We need serious, stone-faced guys behind the microphone. We don't want any bulletin board material. But you're right. And most of these guys down there, ETN is a really good interview and a friendly guy. Like I said, Arian Smith, I mean, you can't help but root for this guy. And Dan Jackson, I mean, I don't think Georgia fans will ever forget Dirty Dan. Certainly, they'll never forget that hit that he had against Georgia Tech to force that fumble. Essentially, game-changing play, in my opinion. Now, the Dogs might have pulled it out, but Dan Jackson was there, developed, a former walk-on, like Kirby said. They didn't even know he was coming. He just showed up, and he's done amazing things. Who knows, maybe a year from now it'll be Cash Jones down there at the Senior Bowl with something to prove. Georgia seems to find these guys, Cody, and that is something that Kirby's done a really good job with. I can't tell the Lad McConkey story enough. He's the last guy they're getting ready to sign. Nobody else wanted him. Okay, Georgia says we'll take him and turn him into one of the top NFL rookies, receivers in the NFL. And the journey does start here in Mobile for a lot of these guys. This is the start of the NFL draft process. Yeah, the film's out there. Yeah, they've had great careers and guys have passed through practice. But to your point, Kirby's not around anymore. They're not in the Georgia system. They're going to get these players one-on-one. They're going to isolate them and see who they are. They know what they've been a part of, but how do they hold up one-on-one in these receiver, cornerback drills, these pass protection drills, and how coachable are they? What is their attitude like when these NFL coaches lean on them? And they will lean on them this week.
And to bring it completely full circle to where we started our conversation today, once these guys make it in the NFL, we will be following Dan Jackson and cheering for him no matter what team he's on moving forward. All right, that's going to do it for On the Beat this week. We'll have a lot from the Senior Bowl, and we'll talk more draft as it gets closer. It is On the Beat every Monday night right here on DawgNation.